Thank you very much for the wonderful speeches. I have a question about one of the issues that all three of the speakers touched upon. This is a popular issue in the media. And my question is, we have seen a lot of different coverages about Islam or other faiths, other races, religions. So when we see this like negative coverages, what is your opinion? Is it like an intentional thing, or it's just because of the ignorance of some media channels?
Well, you have to answer first because you're about to leave.
Some people are ignorant because they have no exposure to education. And others are intentionally ignorant because they choose not to know the truth, and they could. And those who choose not to know the truth usually have a personal interest in the outcome of misconstruing the matter. And we are finding that politically today, where people who should know better are speaking mistruths because they are appealing to voters and constituents that will help them get elected and advance their own personal careers. And media outlets are positioning themselves in the market of the media, and in doing so, they play to a particular audience, and that audience is not God, who will hold them accountable. It is less about the truth than about people's opinions that advance careers and that make money for them. It is not in the interest of the common good. It is in the interest of personal gain and personal advantage. And much of the strife, I think, that we have today is because we've lost a sense that we're responsible to God and to one another, and that I cannot benefit myself as long as someone else is hurt by my being advantaged. If that is our position, we will be at war with each other all the time. We'll only be fanning fanaticism. To be a person of religious conviction should mean that we have an obligation to one another to speak the truth and to do so in a way that that makes sure that our neighbor is taken care of as well as we. And if we do not do that, we have no right to claim the name of God for our position.
I agree with that. I think sometimes it is a matter of ignorance, and sometimes it's a matter of willful ignorance. And although I don't know if some media outlets are better than others, but I do know that some are worse than others, if you know what I mean. I think the treatment of Islam is particularly bad. So much of that is driven by, aside from all of the political factors we've been talking about, self-gain, getting votes, etc. Just by the complexity of international relations, as it turns out, we're in conflict in countries that are predominantly Muslim, and so Islam gets the attention, that gives an avenue to talk about it and get it worse. But although I think Islam gets the worst treatment, I think in general, across the board, many people in the media do not understand religion. So they don't understand Christianity, they don't understand Buddhism. I think it is an across the board lack of understanding and poor representation. But I think just because of the situation we find ourselves in, Islam gets the brunt of it in ways that are unfair.
I have a question. When Dr. Mason was speaking, you mentioned about poverty and education as the two things we have to eliminate, as far as I understood. And also, Dr. Chancy mentioned about the missing part of education, especially in middle and high school textbooks, social studies textbooks. So I remember a sentence from a very great scholar in Turkey, Said Nursi. He said, we have three enemies: poverty, ignorance, and conflict. We have to overcome these three enemies. So pretty much matching what you were saying. So I don't think there's too much issue in the United States in terms of poverty, as far as I can see. Or education, especially the higher education, university and higher institutions. What would you say about eliminating conflict and separation in the society? How is the religious circles how are they doing in terms of eliminating this danger of conflict? First of all, is there such a danger of conflict and separation in the society, American society today?
You know, I don't think we'll ever eliminate it. It's the nature of human existence for us to disagree and form affinity groups of whatever type, and for those affinity groups to disagree. Just so much depends upon the form that the conflict takes, right? You can have constructive conflict, and that goes back to what I was talking about in terms of arguing about our different visions of the good life and trying to figure out how to all get along with each other. But then you can have conflict that leads to, genuine physical conflict as well, in which people get hurt. And I think it will be interesting to see, at least in American society, what happens in the decades ahead as we become increasingly more diverse and more pluralistic. Is it going to be the case that as people are around groups different from themselves, that there's a positive effect and that they become more tolerant and understanding and educated, just that the tolerance that comes from interacting with people? Or to what extent is interacting with diverse groups going to make people push off and retreat into their own enclaves? I think this is going to be the task of religious groups to try to head off that idea of withdrawing, or the old Western metaphor of circling the wagons. I think that's some of what we're seeing now in some of the public sentiments we talk about.
I'm not really sure that I agree with your point about poverty and education not being a problem in America. I think it's actually becoming more of a problem in that what we are seeing in the last generation is an increasing widening of the gap between those who have great wealth and those who have very little. One of the secrets to America's period of peace and prosperity, to a lack of conflict, was the building up of a middle class. And that middle class is beginning to disappear. I'm concerned that what's happening now is we have conflict at both ends of the economic level. We have people who have a greater sense of desperation, who are in poverty, and who are not going to take this anymore after a while, and will be in the streets as a result, because their sense of opportunity and hopefulness is disappearing before their eyes. The ability for people to move up the ladder is being taken away in their minds. What's more, the phenomenon of the Tea Party and others is this is generally a wealthy group, and they are fearful of losing their advantage and their privilege in society. And so there is a kind of class warfare going on in a sense. And this sense of conflict is being played out right now by those who don't want to lose what they have and believe that they have a right to it, regardless of whether anyone else has a fair stake, and those who are feeling left out of the system. So I think education and poverty are two of the real roots of conflict, and it's hard to put them as if they are three different things. I still think that that's a factor.
Questions?
Comment. For about 50 or 60 years, at least here in this Dallas area and probably throughout the country, we Christians have been reuniting in an ecumenical spirit. Little known to other religious groups, we've been very diverse in our practice of Christianity. So we have come to a place where we love one another, we're more respectful, we're brothers and sisters in our religion. So I think that's an interesting point. Here in Dallas, that has served us well as we opened our dialogue with Jews in the Dallas community. And then in the 30 years ago, or maybe longer, we opened it to trilogues with conversations with Muslims. And especially we women have opened doors, and we find we have more in common than not. So we live in a place where we've had all kinds of opportunities for getting together. I think I'd like to challenge the panel to tell us what we should be doing right now in Dallas. We are, we further our cause of getting along and understanding one another. I know schools need attention. We used to have a great religious community task force in Dallas. It started with 5 people, ended up with 65. Every possible religion were represented. So that's gone by the board, but I know there's a great challenge for us as ecumenical Christians, as people in dialogue and trilogue, to continue our efforts here in the Dallas community. So I'd like to ask, beside education and addressing issues, political issues and poverty issues, what else we could be doing. This is an example of what we do, but if you have any suggestions.
Isabel, if I could take that real quickly and say that I am going to let the other panelists answer, as I have to leave at this point, but I'll be glad to hear them tell me later what I should be doing to answer your questions. And I want to thank you very much, Mr. Shari and Mark, thank you so much, and to all of you. And now I would like to give my seat to Dr. Hunt, who has come into the room at this point, and say that he is, as far as I'm concerned, always welcome to speak for me as well. So.
Thank you, St. George. Thank you.
Let me apologize for not having been here at the beginning. Thanks.
So anything?
For me, it's hard to fit into that role, because my role, obviously, and the emphasis of my talk, is on education. That's what I know about. That's what I do. I don't have the experience of civic leadership to draw upon to help me think of practical ways. But I do think that what you mentioned, things like this tonight, are very, very important. I mean, here we are in a Methodist theological school with people of multiple faiths, trying to navigate a common interest in warding off extremism and violence. To the extent this is happening in other capacities, it's a good thing. I think more events like tonight. But in terms of an organizational framework for doing that, I'm not the best person to ask. It's not my forte.
You should ask me then.
Well, let me ask you, what do you think we could be doing?
A question for Mr. Ansari. I appreciated your discussion about Hadijites, and I'm wondering, is there any hope? Are there things we talked about, ignorance?